Hi, Aaron Thomas with prenups.com. And this week I'm answering the question, how do I bring up the idea of a prenup to my fiance? So I've given a lot of thought to this over the years, and I think my approach is a bit unconventional. So stick with me here. My suggested approach is to avoid immediately mentioning the word prenup. As someone who's in the business of drafting prenups and postnups, I know all too well how much baggage is attached to the word prenup. Many people hear it and immediately think it's a dirty word, which is really unfortunate because I think that there are so many couples who could benefit from a prenup that get hung up on the stigma attached to the term, and it can cause a lot of unnecessary expense and heartache down the line. Quick caveat first. I'm assuming if you're watching this video that your spouse is not necessarily pro prenup, or you don't know how they feel about prenups. Maybe it's obvious, but if your spouse is completely on board with a prenup, sure, you can just address it directly and not watch the rest of this video. But I'm going to assume that you think that your spouse may have some resistance to the idea. One more tip before I go into the specific strategy. Don't wait until the month before the wedding. Start several months before the wedding. This is not a decision that should be made lightly or last minute. It's unfair to drop this on your future spouse with little time to get educated and wrap his or her mind around it. And it's not the best way to start what we hope is a lifelong marriage. Here's the strategy. Start with what you are trying to accomplish, not the words, I think we should get a prenup. If you watch my other videos, you already know how many benefits there can be to a prenup that don't involve you getting a divorce. But the general public thinks that prenups are just about keeping all of your money if you get divorced. So if you start with that, your spouse may think that you're planning your divorce before the wedding has happened. Here's a list of things to discuss with your spouse, potentially before you even mention the word prenup. Number one, I think that we should be completely transparent with one another about our income, assets, and debts. Number two, I think that we should be clear about what our rights and responsibilities are regarding what each bring into the marriage. I don't think it would be fair for you to pay the debts that I accumulated before we got married, but I also don't think it makes sense that you automatically own a piece of any assets I had coming in. We should be clear about who's responsible for what debts and who owns the assets that we each bring into the marriage. Number three, we should have a plan for how we structure our finances during the marriage. While my parents may have gotten married at age 21 and used only one bank account and one checkbook throughout their entire marriage, that won't work for us, given that we're each coming in with 3 or 4 bank accounts, 3 or 4 credit cards, a couple of retirement accounts, a property, a business, etc. I've heard that some couples split things up into 3 money buckets: mine, yours, and ours. And that helps couples avoid arguments about who pays for what. Number 4, I believe that it would be helpful for us to have some rules around money during our marriage. For example, what expenses do we pay from the joint accounts? What expenses do we pay from our separate accounts? How much money do each of us contribute to the joint account? And how much do we have for our own personal use? Are our retirement accounts going to be considered joint money or separate? Coming up with a plan now could save us any confusion or disagreement later. And number 5, yes, I think it is probably wise that we at least have a conversation about what things would look like if we didn't work out. I hope that we last forever, but I also know couples that have spent 25% of their net worth in 2 years battling things out in court when the marriage didn't last. I would like for us to avoid that if the worst came to worst. Once you've addressed these issues, if your spouse is on board, I think it is much easier to broach the topic of handling all of these issues by going through the process of preparing a prenuptial agreement where you can address all of these types of things and more. If your spouse knows that you're honestly trying to do something that benefits both of you, it can save a lot of confusion that might otherwise come if you just blurt out, "Baby, I want a prenup." Also, a little shameless plug here. Come visit us at prenups.com and check out some of the podcasts we've done where I talk about the benefits of prenups. I know couples that have sat down and listened to one of those episodes together, and they jointly decide that a prenup is in their best interest. If you want to let me do some of the hard work for you, sit down and listen to one of those together with your fiance.